Hi, this is Ethan and this is chemistry lesson number 3. Today we will be going over significant figures. So to begin with, what are significant figures? Significant figures are essential in chemistry as they are used to indicate the quantity of something. They are used in mathematical calculations and it deals with the accuracy and precision of numbers. It also helps notate very big and small numbers so it is easier to read and see. In chemistry, it is important to estimate uncertainty in the final result, which is why significant figures are so important. Significant figure rules. Rule number 1 states that all digits from 1 to 9 are significant. Rule number 2 states that zeros between significant digits are significant. Rule number 3 states that zeros after a non-zero digit and a decimal are significant. Rule number 4 states that zeros between a non-zero digit and a decimal are significant. Lastly, rule number 5 states that for scientific notation, focus only on the digits before the times 10. So to apply the rules, we will do some practice problems. Problem number 1. How many significant figures are in the number 164? We will use rule number 1, and since there are 3 numbers in 164 that are within the range of 1 to 9, the answer is 3 significant figures. Problem number 2. 100,001 has how many significant figures? We will use rules 1 and 2. There are 2 ones in 100,001 that are in the range of 1 to 9, so they are significant. And there are 4 zeros between the significant digits. So altogether, there are 6 significant figures in 100,001. Problem number 3. How many significant figures are in 50.0? We will use rules 1, 3, and 4. The number 5 will be a significant figure by rule number 1. The 0 before the decimal is a significant figure since it is a 0 between a non-zero digit and a decimal, which applies to rule 4. Lastly, the 0 after the decimal is significant due to rule number 3, since it is after a non-zero digit and a decimal. Altogether, 50.0 has 3 significant figures. Problem number 4. How many significant figures are in 10.0? This is the same as the last problem, with the 1 applying to rule 1, the 0 before the decimal applying to rule 4, and the 0 after the decimal applying to rule 3. So there are 3 sig figs in 10.0. Problem number 5. 8.02 times 10 to the power of negative 12 has how many significant figures? So by rule 5, we ignore the times 10 to the power of negative 12 since we don't count that in the significant figures. So we are left with 8.02, and since the 8 and 2 apply to rule 1, they are both sig figs. The 0 applies to rule 3 since it is after a non-zero digit and a decimal. Altogether, there are 3 sig figs in this problem. Calculations with significant figures. When multiplying and dividing, limit and round to the least number of significant figures in any of the factors. When adding and subtracting, limit and round to the least number of decimal places in any of the numbers. Things to note. Memorizing these rules are very important as they will make you faster at rounding numbers. In word problems, make sure to round to the lowest number of sig figs that are present in the question. For example, if a question gives you 2 numbers, one of which has 2 sig figs and the other has 3 sig figs, you would round to 2 sig figs since it is the lowest out of the 2 numbers. So, final example questions for this lesson. How many sig figs are in 501? We have to use rule 1 and 2. And rule 1 states that all digits from 1 to 9 are significant, meaning that the 5 and the 1 are significant. Rule 2 states that zeros between any or 2 significant digits are significant. So that means the 0 between the 5 and 1 is also significant. Therefore, the answer is 3 sig figs. How many sig figs are in 152.0? For this problem, we will have to use rule 1 and 3. And since the 0 comes after a non-zero digit and a decimal, that means it is a sig fig by rule number 3. This means there are 4 sig figs in 152.0. How many sig figs are in 6.6260 times 10 to the power of negative 34? So we'll have to use rule 1, 3, and 5, and by rule 5, we ignore the times 10 part and just focus on the first part. Rule 1 states that all digits from 1 to 9 are significant, so the 3 6s and the 2 are all significant. So there's 4 sig figs already, and since the 0 is after a decimal and a non-zero digit, it is also a sig fig by rule number 3. Therefore, there are 5 sig figs in this problem. How many sig figs are in 1010? So to solve this, we'll have to use rule 1 and 2. Rule 1 states that all digits from 1 to 9 are significant, so the 2 ones in this problem, or this number, are significant, and by rule 2, the 0 between the 2 ones is also significant, but the 0 doesn't apply to any rule, so it is not a sig fig. Therefore, there are 3 sig figs in this problem. What is 505 kg minus 450.25 kg? So we'll have to use the addition and subtraction rule, and the rule states that the answer should be rounded to the least number of decimal places in any of the number. So since 505 has the least number of decimal places, the answer would be 55 after subtraction. So lastly, what is 8.00 grams minus 2.0 grams all over 3.00 milliliters? In order to figure this out, we'll have to use both the addition and subtraction rule as well as the multiplication and division rule. First, we have to look at the numerator. The addition and subtraction rule states that the answer should be rounded to the least number of decimal places. Since 2.0 has the fewer amount of decimal places, the numerator would simplify to 6.0 grams. Then we can use the multiplication and division rule, which states that the answer should be rounded to the least number of sig figs. And since 6.0 will have fewer sig figs than 3.00, the final answer should have 2 sig figs. So after simplifying, the final answer will be 2.0 grams per milliliters. Thank you for watching today's lesson on significant figures, and I hope to see you in the next video.